It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
And welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, available on iHeartRadio every morning and also on Spotify and Apple and wherever you get your podcast from. It is a Thursday morning and we are rocking through the week. Tomorrow, Friday already, and I can't believe how much talk is still going on about the outcome of the block. Everybody has got an opinion, but this morning we are not talking about the block. In fact, coming up is more of a serious discussion around your heart and looking after yourself, especially as we look towards the end of the year. The stress factor exists when it comes to real estate. I'll repeat it. The stress factor exists when it comes to real estate. A lot of people think it doesn't. It is a given. Anything that carries high stakes, like transacting with property, especially if it is your first home, carries a mountain of stress. Then you have the interest rates to just go on top of the ice cream, and it's no wonder that everybody is feeling a little bit stressed. Now, we remember earlier this year the loss of Shane Warne and Rodney Marsh, and back in April we highlighted looking after yourself then and spoke to a heart expert. So that discussion is coming up in just a moment, and if you haven't seen your doctor for a while and you know the signs of stress are there, do it before Christmas arrives. Pick up the phone and book in the appointment. And don't go, oh no, I don't have time for that. Because the number one thing in your life isn't your portfolio, it's your health.
It's your Real Estate Podcast for breakfast.
And if you're celebrating your birthday for today, for November the 10th, you are sharing your birthday with Taron Egerton. He's turning 32. That was one way to get to know Elton John, do a movie and portray him in Rocket Man. Miranda Lambert, she is a country singer. She is turning 38 today. Tracy Morgan is turning 56 today. And it was on this day in 1989 the Germans began demolishing the Berlin Wall. And also quite a significant day on this day back in 1969, Sesame Street premieres.
We talk with leading property commentators with analysis, predictions, forecasts, and what's trending every morning from 6:30. It's the Main Centre Forecast with PRD, selling smarter every day.
And let's have a look at your weather on this Thursday morning. Good morning to you in Sydney, expecting a mainly dry day, cloudy conditions and a high of 23 degrees. 27 is your forecast high in Melbourne. Some showers today, so grab the raincoat. In Brisbane, expecting a mostly fine, clear blue sky day with 27 degrees. And in Perth today, 1 or 2 showers to clear and expecting a high today of 23 degrees.
It's your weekday real estate breakfast with news, interviews and predictions every morning on the Real Estate Podcast.
So with that heart checkup in mind, let's get a heart expert onto the Real Estate Podcast. Dr Fiona Foo, she is a leading cardiologist expert, and a very good morning to you, Fiona. Welcome to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Shane Warne and also Rod Marsh, as I mentioned, it came as a great shock. But of course, it's happening every day to families up and down the country. It's highlighted because I think of how well we knew of Shane Warne and Rodney Marsh. As someone who works in this space, do you think that the public falsely believes that professional athletes, and in particular the exercise associated with sport, affords people some sort of magic protection against heart attacks from ever happening in the first place?
Yes, I think that is very true. And, I think a lot of these young, fit males and females, they think, I exercise, I'm healthy, I'm not going to have a heart attack. If you ask a lot of these kind of middle-aged males or even like the younger fit males, when was the last time they went to the GP? Most of them would say they've never seen a GP. And, do they know their cholesterol? Do they know their blood pressure? Again, most of them wouldn't know. And so I think what it's highlighted is that even though you're young and fit and you have no symptoms, young fit males can have a heart attack because Heart attacks can occur out of plaque that just suddenly ruptures and causes a heart attack. And you don't know any of that, but 50%, more than 50% of heart attacks occur suddenly. So people don't get any kind of warning that they've got a problem until they have the heart attack.
Yeah, and perhaps what are some of the most common causes of cardiovascular disease?
So we talk about what we call traditional risk factors. So the biggest traditional risk factors are things such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, and a strong family history of ischemic heart disease. So a family history of having heart attacks. And also as you get older. So men get old, as they get older, their risk increases. So do females, particularly after menopause. So those are what we call the traditional risk factors. But then there are a lot of other, what we call non-traditional risk factors. And I do a lot of women and heart disease. Women, for example, have a lot of other non-traditional risk factors. For example, pregnancy complications if they've had diabetes or high blood pressure during pregnancy. People with autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, they have an increased risk. And then even things such as like mental health disorders. So depression is a big risk factor for heart disease as well. So there's a lot of what we call both traditional and non-traditional risk factors that increase the risk of heart disease.
Yeah, it's a good point that you raise as far as women are concerned, because after a heart attack, and I didn't know this, women are at a greater risk of developing a blood clot that can cause another heart attack.
Women, when they have a heart attack, and actually anyone who has a heart attack, they're at risk of having more heart attacks. So women particularly, unfortunately, do actually a bit worse than men in general after a heart attack. And that's because of a lot of things like delay in diagnosis. You know, they think it's a male disease. So there's a whole lot of reasons why women do a lot worse than men after a heart attack. But actually, it's both men and women that are at increased risk of further heart attacks if you've had a heart attack.
And on the Real Estate Podcast, one of the big talking points with homes is the office and working from home, which has evolved and spectacularly gone mental during the pandemic, which means that a lot of us are sitting on our backsides for longer periods of time. And I think it can be argued working from home, being self-employed especially, you might be sitting there longer than what you should be. Is that a bit of an issue that people should really think about?
Yeah, that is a big issue. So prolonged sitting does increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. And even if you do your 30-minute exercise a day, you're still at increased risk if you've been sitting down for long periods of time. So, every 30 minutes, you should be getting up, moving your legs around, because definitely lots of data to show if you have a sedentary job, prolonged sitting increases your risk of cardiovascular disease, even if you exercise, your half an hour at other times as well.
Right, so that's some very good advice. So you've heard it from the cardiovascular expert, and she is saying that you've got to get up and move out of that seat. And also, while I've got you there are very accurate cardiovascular screening tests that are available free to us that can detect early disease with preventative management. So just talk a little bit to that, because I think a lot of people think that, these tests are difficult, etc.
I think everyone should have at some stage, like what we call a bit of a heart health check with their GP. So the main thing is looking at their risk factors. So checking their blood pressure, cholesterol and sugar levels with their GP, because you can't feel high cholesterol, you can't feel high sugars, you can't feel high blood pressure. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do, and in males, kind of around 40, more than 40, 45, and females, probably after menopause, maybe 50, 55, we can do something called a coronary calcium score. Now, this is a plaque score to show whether you have any plaque or atheroma, hardened atheroma in your heart arteries. And if you do have some atheroma, if you have an elevated plaque score, the more plaque you have, the increased risk you can have a heart attack. Like heart attacks form on plaque. So this is a very good kind of almost like a screening test in the sense that it will show whether you have plaque in your arteries, and that will increase your future risk of a heart attack. If you have a lot of plaque, that increases your risk. If you have no plaque at all in your arteries right now, that's great. That means your risk of having a heart attack in the next kind of 5-10 years is very low. It's not negligible because you can still have what we call soft plaque and you can still develop plaque in your arteries, but that is reassuring. But what's more important is that if you do have plaque in your arteries, you can't get rid of some of that hardened calcified plaque. And so you need to be more aggressive with all your risk factors. That test is very quick. It's like having a chest X-ray. It's a very quick CT scan. Unfortunately, in Australia, it's actually not Medicare rebated, but it is a very quick test.
Yeah, thanks for sort of highlighting that. And just finally, the reversal of cardiovascular disease. You would have seen numerous patients stabilise and often reverse the disease, which takes a fair amount of discipline, I know, by people to just change their lifestyle, right?
Yeah. So with atheroma, a plaque in your arteries, you can reverse it to some extent. So you can get your risk factors down by lifestyle changes, diet and exercise. In terms of reversing, we know there are some studies that show you can reduce some of the plaque that you have by getting your LDL down really low. So your LDL is the bad cholesterol. So if you get your LDL down to really low levels, there is some what we call plaque regression in your heart arteries. But in general, we kind of say if you've got plaque there, you just got to get your risk factors under such good control to reduce your risk of getting more, because the more plaque you have, that increases your risk of further heart attacks and heart disease.
Well, I have learnt something this morning, so thank you for that. And Dr. Fiona Foo, thank you for coming on to the Real Estate Podcast.
No worries, you're welcome.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.